kind, she's warm, she's encouraging. She is always humble, which I just love about her personality. And actually, that's what I've enjoyed about my journey with all of these living composers, is having an opportunity to see them as people. And not one of them has been anything but kind to me.
Pianist, composer, and vocal coach Jacqueline Hairston was born in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1932. Her father was a mechanic who appreciated music deeply and could sing anything. And her mother was a school teacher who discovered Juilliard's pre-collegiate program while getting her master's degree at Columbia University in New York City. Hairston was writing songs long before she had a piano to play in the 3rd grade, and music was constantly being played in her mind. Her 3rd and 6th grade teachers noticed and nourished her musical talents.
We didn't have a piano in the home, and so I was intrigued for music. I think I was just entrenched with it from birth. And I would say, "Come hear the song I made up." And my mother would say, "Oh, silly, we don't have a piano." And I would pretend like the kitchen table was the piano. And I would put my fingers on the table and pretend like I was playing and sing some little ditty. You know, melodies were coming to me all the time. And I think that came from my dad. Now, my dad was a college graduate, but he didn't choose to do what Black men did in those days who were successful, a teacher, preacher, or doctor. He was a mechanic. And he would tell me, "Come, let's go out to my car." We had a 1937 Chevrolet. And he lifted up the hood. He said, "Now, let me show you this." I said, "I'm not interested in cars. I'm interested in music." So he was a little hurt. But I remember he could sing anything, just had a marvelous ear that I think I really got that from him. I will never forget my 3rd grade teacher and my 6th grade teachers. They were the ones who really encouraged my musical whatever it was to come out, especially the 6th grade teacher, because she would always come in the class and she would say, "All right, class." And somebody would say, "Well, what are we going to do today?" And she'd say, "Daily we're meeting before our work or play, but always in greeting we say a glad good morning." And I think I might have said, "What melody? What is that from?" And that's where I was introduced to composers. And I was always interested in classical music anyway, so it really sparked my interest. But in fact, the one that sang this "Daily We're Meeting" song, she was the one that I looked up to, and she said, "You know what, I think you're going to be a musician." And I said, "No, I'm going to be a concert pianist." And she said, "Oh my, that's impressive." And so it was back to my early days. That's when I was introduced to. My mom was an elementary school teacher. Now, she other than singing in the church choir, she wasn't as musical as my dad. But she was working on her master's at Columbia University. And that's when she found out that Juilliard had this special program just for kids. And so she put me in that. And that ended up being my early high school years, that I took those 3 consecutive summers at Juilliard. As I said, I could hear things, and I had melodies running around in my head. And I would go to the kitchen table, since we didn't have a piano then, and pretend like I'm playing these little tunes that I'm making up. And then that's when I thought, my parents thought, "Well, you know what, we better try to get a piano in the home, because we might have a basket case here with this kid pretending to create tunes on the kitchen table." And so I guess about 3rd grade, I think that might have been when we finally got a piano. And I remember that first piano was a Wurlitzer. That was the first at-home piano.
While at Juilliard, Hairston studied composition with Evelyn White, who urged her student to write music in the classroom. Hairston got her bachelor's degree in piano performance at Howard University School of Music in Washington, D.C. She played in every section of Howard's orchestra on the flute, violin, and trumpet. Hairston earned her master's degree in music and music education from Columbia University in New York City.
A woman who was from my hometown was from Charlotte, and her name was Evelyn White. And she had a marvelous instrument, a vocal instrument, but she also taught a little bit of composition. And she encouraged me to write things in the class that others could sing along. She said, "Now, Jack, keep it simple now." She said, "because I know you're quite advanced in your introduction to this, but keep it real simple." So yes, she was encouragement for that. Evelyn White, I'll never forget her.
Well, first off, I met Jackie at her home because her brother I was doing the classical song of Black composers, wanting to do a film and wanting to do a series of, just when I was wanting to do a series of performances and researching it. Her brother was Dr. George Butler, who discovered Wynton Marsalis as well in both classical and others, who was the producer of Nancy Wilson, and he was the vice president of Sony. And so I went to him in New York because he produced so many famous albums and all, to get his guidance. And he said, "Well, meet me in my sister's house in Oakland, since I lived in California. He says, "I'll be there at such and such a time." So I visited him and talked with him. And then his sister said, "I write music." And you know how you go, "Oh, sure, okay." And so she said, "Well, I can play some of it for you." And I said, "Okay." And I went over to sing some of this music. And I about fell on the floor. I sang through 3 pieces that are classic pieces that some of the greatest singers in the world sing, of course. I just heard Larry Brownlee sing both of them. "This Little Light" and "No Ways Tired," which is her theme song, which is the song she's most famous for because it's one of her most innovative pieces.
You know, it starts off, I'm very, very strophic. I'm singing, I'm seeking for a city, hallelujah. I'm seeking, and then you do 2 verses, then you go into this real kind of like churchy feel. "I don't feel no ways tired," that most people in the church, you know, people who grow up in the church know the song. And then when you get to the end of that, she put a coda on it. "I don't believe he brought me this far." And it, you know, it depends on the temperament of the singer, how that is expressed. You know, "I can't believe he's brought me this far. I won't believe he's brought me this far to leave me." She added, I mean, it's not uncommon in the church, you know, with hymns, you know, for singers who sing the hymns as soloists, when they repeat the chorus, to add a little bit of something, as we have a running joke, you know, "Give me 3 loops at the end," and on those loops, you know, it's literally the 3 loops. And then she notated every loop. If you ever come to the Black church, you can see them, you know, somebody singing a hymn and you'll see. That means loop that song.
She likes to do things like start a cappella and then bring in the accompaniment in a chordal accompaniment, but then it quickly shifts to a different, even more adventurous accompaniment harmonically. Then she might do something like an interpolation, which would not, in "Guide My Feet," all of a sudden she goes up to, like I said, an A flat, which would not have matched the first 3 verses. Then she goes into a hum. Then she brings it into the final section, which is a recapitulation of the opening text. Another technique of hers is modulation. She will quite often do a certain number of verses and then go into a modulation in a new key, which is very much a part of certain church traditions. She likes to put 2 spirituals together quite often and weave them in. So it's really clever the way she uses one spiritual into another, or does sort of a quodlibet of putting several, layering them. But I love her writing and the work that she's done with spirituals, and her keeping a legacy alive that would not have that needed a champion. She came along at a time that spirituals needed that champion, and they're just beautiful writing.
Dr. Hairston is a prolific composer who has mastered various genres from spiritual arrangements to contemporary art song. Her works have been recorded by the London Symphony and the Columbia Symphony Orchestra and performed by the San Francisco Women's Philharmonic, Linda Tillery and the Cultural Heritage Choir, as well as Metropolitan Opera stars Grace Bumbry, Kathleen Battle, Denyce Graves, and many others worldwide.
When I remember as someone when I was in school, elementary school, I had heard about Leontine Price and actually tried to get a piece to her. Of course, it didn't go anywhere. But then I heard there was this younger woman, Kathleen Battle. When she did her return to the Met program, and I'd heard of her all along, I still had no knowledge that I would meet her. But when she returned to the Met, I've forgotten what year that was, that's when I sent her something, and she was impressed with it. Then I had the occasion to meet her years later when I had sent her some solo things. In fact, if I were to look at my list, there were arrangements that I did for her because she loved Christmas music. And so I did arrangements for her, like Mary Had a Baby. In fact, there were 5 tunes altogether, 5 or 6, that I wrote just for her. And then I met another man named Glendower Jones. Glendower was a publishing printer. And so I sent them to him, and he said, "Oh, Jackie," he said, "well, let's do a volume of your favorite songs and spirituals," of which there were 18. And the first 5 or 6 were the tunes that I'd written for Kathleen Battle.
I remember meeting her at a restaurant. It was near my hotel where I was staying. I was in Northern California, and so she came to visit with me, and we immediately hit it off. And as part of that, she asked me if there was a spiritual that I particularly liked, and I remember us meandering to her car, and I said, "Well, I have always liked the spiritual Lord, I'll Go." And she says, "Oh, I don't know that one. Will you sing it for me?" And so I sang it for her, and she had this recording. She recorded it, and she took my. I remember singing it because it has many verses of the Lord, I'll go, Lord, I'll go, Lord, I'll go, Lord, I'll go. If the Lord wants somebody, here am I, oh Lord, send me. Maybe friendless, Lord, I'll go, maybe friendless, etc. Maybe motherless. And we used to sing this in my church, the call to discipleship. It would really render people, get them, verved up, and if they needed some courage to move to the front of the church. And so to truncate my presenting that, I said, Lord, I'll go, Lord, I'll go, if the Lord wants somebody. And when she did the arrangement, she went, which it just is kind of like this like a song without words that you fill in the blank there. a really wonderful, fruitful partnership and friendship. I brought her down here for residency on her works, and I encourage some. She's a very good resident artist. I mean, spectacular. She is by far the best as a residence artist. Interfacing with the students, inspiring them, interfacing with the public. Oh, just amazing.
No matter what genre she chooses, Hairston writes music perfectly suited for the voice. She reveals a clear understanding of the instrument with her ability to display lyric vocal virtuosity. Hairston's kindness and openness have been the hallmarks of her many musical interactions and collaborations. This benevolence, in conjunction with her spirituality, informs the music she creates.
When you come to her art song, which a lot of people don't know, you come to her really how important spirituality is to her and how important the sounds are to her. But when she wrote on Consciousness Streams, one text is her own. She wrote one text. One text is Beethoven, and the other is Howard Thurman, who was once dean of Marsh Chapel and was very associated with Martin Luther King and the founder of the Church of All People in San Francisco. So what is in common in those is, in fact, the sense of consciousness, the sense of healing, the sense of what she has to say about spirituality. Most people don't realize that when they sing that.
Well, it's so funny that you asked why I wrote it, because even afterwards I asked, why did I write this? Well, because I considered myself a composer, arranger in certain elements. You know, the spiritual, of course, was first station with me. But I thought, now, if I'm to be considered a well-rounded composer arranger, I need to dabble into other types. And that's when I thought, I've never done anything contemporary. Oh, let me try doing something contemporary. So that's when I got into Debussy, listening to his works. And I thought, well, let me see. I'm just going to go with whatever comes to the top of my head. And that's what I did on Consciousness Streams. And I don't know if it ended up being part of a trilogy. The second one was in tribute to Dr. Howard Thurman, which was A Season of Remembrance. And the third one, I happened to run across, don't ask me how, I ran across words by Beethoven, who was a favorite composer of Thou Alone Canst Inspire, words by Beethoven. I thought, my goodness. So I became fascinated with that because I thought Beethoven and I had a kinship, even though, of course, he was long since deceased. But his birthday was in December, and so was mine. So I said, oh, we're both Sagittarians. So yeah, I think I can work with this. And usually when I have words that I see, and there's not been a tune written for it, the melody just comes somehow from within the spirit of within the element.
you know, I heard I love Balm and Gilead, always loved it. And at that point, she was experimenting and Steal Away. And so I asked her for both of those. And she did the most unusual settings that I realized were art songs. They weren't spirituals. Now, what's the difference? A lot of people don't understand the difference. Very clearly different. Number one, you're not bound by any of the rules, and spirituals have rules, right? State the head, put only certain variations there that are allowed by the composer and within the harmonic structure. Many people, of course, with spirituals make mistakes and try to put gospel ornaments in you know, early harmonics, and that doesn't work. But with an art song, the artist is setting a poem, the composer. And he or she starts off right away setting that poem, putting in the ornaments that they want, usually from the very beginning, changing the melody if they wish, and most of the times they wish, from the very beginning. And so it's like any other leader or something, it's theirs. It's a composition to that poem. It will even though it has hints of the spiritual, you cannot say that it is that spiritual exactly anymore. It is that person's take melodically is different on that spiritual. Jacqueline is very much into healing. Her CD is a healing harvest. She has courses in spirituality and music. And so you know that she wants this piece to be healing. And so to combine the healing aspect of Balm and Gilead as it is originally, and then to put in the melismas, and then to put in the jumps, and to make them piano as she asked for them, you know, is just a feat, a technical feat. And you can't think of it as a traditional spiritual because you will not use a lot of dialect in this. This is an art song. And if you try, you will detract, actually. If you think about that song, you know, there's nothing to do with the melody. You know, it's a melisma for the voice. And so, and there is a Balm and Gilead doesn't make sense in a song like this. It's absolute elegance, that song, as you notice, you know. So what you do is you make the language simple, but there is, you know, I would say it's not. I don't sing it like it's the King's English, but very simple. No attempt to do dialect. It doesn't make sense in an art song like that. It's a bravura art song is what it is.
Sometimes I feel discouraged. I think my wits in the wind. But then the Holy Spirit
spiritual is born of moving the spirit. It is born of that. It is not an intellectual exercise. The spiritual is born in the same way. It's spirituals, of course, give birth eventually to the blues. It's just this. She connects with this organic sense of connection to spirit, and I know from many conversations with Jackie that is part of her process, is connection to higher ideals more than just the notes on the page, but through the healing power of sound and the healing power of positivity and all of those sorts of things. She is a very, very interesting person, but her ability to transmit all of that in this perfect casing, and I say perfect in really recognizing the strength of that word. When you think of "Don't Feel No Ways Tired," I mean, there's not a note of that is inefficient or uncalled for, or that if you do it as it's written will not give you the right result. If you do it as written, it will give you the right result. Not every spiritual can say that. Not every arrangement of spiritual can offer that. And the same thing with "Guide My Feet," her arrangement of "Guide My Feet." If you just do what's on the page, you're going to get a certain result, and it's going to be positive. Now, she also leaves you enough space where you can, not unlike Schubert, lend some of your own artistic uniqueness, recognizing that spirituals comes from an improvisatory art form. It is at its birth improvisatory, and she leaves room for that. And you have to be careful, I think, obviously, as you have to do with all spirituals, you have to be careful not to gild the lilies, as it were, to go to while the spiritual may have been written in 2018, it refers to a pathos that is more aligned with 1920 or 1930 than it would be post-blues 1930s, you know. So I said all of that to say not a lot of gospelization of it. You will hear that done. I have been criticized actually for not doing more gospelizing, but I know from whence I speak, and I come from a gospel background. I know exactly how to do all of those runs and curlicues. I don't do them very specifically because that's not what the spiritual is. That's a different genre.
You know what? There's a statement I always write at the beginning of every spiritual. I'll say, your expression, your dynamics are left entirely up to you. I might have a suggestion of a fortissimo here, a pianissimo there. I said, but the final process is left up to you. You're to use. So on every spiritual that I do for a singer now, I will write the expressions, and the expressions are left entirely to your discretion. One of the other joys in my life is being a church musician, and when I'm given the opportunity to supply a prelude, sometimes that prelude might be a spiritual that's a piano and adaptation of one of my spirituals, or if I choose to do something that's considered public domain like a Bach or a Beethoven, I go with what comes. And on that note, I guess the only other person I would give credit to, as far as my personal life, I have one daughter, and my husband was deceased many, many years ago, but I have one daughter who had four, who are my grands, and let's see, one girl and three boys. And the one girl that she had she named after me, Jacqueline. Everybody calls me Jackie, but she wants to be called Jacqueline, the full name. So Jacqueline has 2 kids, Gabriella and Darian. And one of my daughter's boys has 2 children, Trey and Coco. So I try to remember their names so when I come in contact with them, they won't say I confuse one of their names with the other. But that's the joy in my life, my present life, my private life, is enjoying my one daughter who I'm so proud of, who works with UC Davis on the administrative level, and then my 4 great grands that I always have to think of fondly.